Unfortunately for me, Obocchama-kun is another board game. These Famicom board games all come from the dark ages of board game design, where randomness was considered to be the key board game mechanic, rather than mitigating randomness being the key. It's designs like these that made decades of people go, "Boy, I hate board games," until the late 90s brought about a renaissance in design. The best thing I can say about Obocchama-kun is that there are significant decisions for the player to make in the game. There are multiple strategies that you can employ. You're not just governed by what space you happen to land on. But it's still really shallow and a bit of a snore. Obocchama-kun started out as a comic, and it's about a very rich little boy who has wacky globe-trotting adventures. It's best known for being extremely crude, to the point that the animated version was infamously blasted by the PTA in Japan. The plot of the game is that Obocchama-kun and friends are racing around the world trying to fulfill the request of Obocchama-kun's would-be girlfriend, Samayo. She wants all sorts of absurd things, and so you have to travel to wherever they are, and then travel to her somewhere else in the world, and the first person to deliver that item gets a kiss. By default, the first person to 5 kisses wins, but you can set that value higher or lower. Up to 4 players may race for these presents, but there can be up to 5 players in the game with extra slots taken up by computer players. The computer players are always hopping vampires, and they don't obey the same rules as human players do. On your turn, you check the dictionary to find out how many spaces you can move. It'll be between 1 and 8. The lower right-hand corner shows your status, how many movement points you have, how much energy you have, and how much cash you have. Some events and spaces that you land on will affect those. And cash is mainly used if you land on a city, because then you go to a store. There's a lot of items in this game that you can purchase to use on players. Now there's 3 key differences between the human players and the Kyonshi AI opponents. First, the AI can't use alternate methods of transportation. Or rather, they can't easily use them. You're traveling across the whole world in Obocchama-kun, and a lot of locations are only reachable via certain airports or ships. Fortunately, they provide this map in the box for you, and you're probably going to need to reference it often. There are some airports that only link 2 destinations, like Los Angeles and Hawaii, but there are other airports that go to every major continent. It takes you 2 turns of travel to get through transportation like this, while the Kyonshis, if they're forced to use something like this, can do it in 1. However, generally speaking, they prefer to walk rather than fly or use the train. The train doubles your movement, but you can only get on or off at a station. So you can get around faster than the hopping vampires if you know the routes. But the vampires have another advantage in movement, and that's that they ignore terrain. Your movement is blocked by things like mountains or the Great Wall of China, while they can just hop through them. That often lets them take more direct routes to the presents. The final difference is that a human player can use the items found in cities, while the vampires cannot. The items include things like flowers that are essentially landmines that can spread out. There's also missiles that will hit a random target, send them flying, and open up craters around the landscape. There's around a dozen different items that you can purchase and use, and most of them are simpler than that. Things like recover health, double your next movement, or randomly adjust people's cash. As you're moving around the board, you can collide with other players to knock them back a bit. This also takes off a bit of their health. If they're carrying the present, you can steal it away from them like this. After all players have moved, you get a big map screen that shows you where the current destination is, whether it's a present or the girlfriend. So you won't have any trouble staying on target. It takes about 15 minutes for every kiss to play out in Obocchama-kun. That means, on average, assuming random distribution, it will take over 3 hours to complete a game on the default settings. The game does save regularly, and will pick up exactly where you left off, but it is extremely sensitive to the save game getting corrupted. It seems to write data to that area of RAM almost constantly, and apparently it was extremely common to lose your save game halfway through. In Japan, this game is really well regarded for some reason. I'm guessing because it was one of those games that everyone gathered around to play together. And while obviously I didn't like it, Obocchama-kun is not nearly as bad as some of the other board games we've seen on the Famicom. At least here you're regularly having to choose what path to take if you want to chase down the present or try to intercept people after they've gotten it, back off and gather resources for later, or go for it now. There are things that you are doing here. But the end result is still 90% random, and you have to play a long time to see what that will finally be. And the events that you encounter in this game are rather bland. There's not a lot of humor here for a game based on a humor comic. Obocchama-kun is an improvement over Sugorok-based video games, but not much of one.